Well, what's going on, Dan and Will? I'd say my mom used to say never talk to strangers, but we're so friendly here. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, what we're going to be talking about today, and what is so exciting about, the problems that we're going to be solving with this new feature we're going to be demoing also. That's right. I said demo. We're not just all, you know, jaw jacking and talking. We'll actually show you some cool stuff too.
Yeah, I'll go first. Will Lang, Principal Product Manager for WorkSpaces. I think since you're giving shout outs to all the locations, I'm calling from sunny Los Angeles, where it actually is sunny today. Dan?
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Dan Garibay, and I'm calling in from Dallas, Texas. I'm one of the solution architects that helps work with the specializing in workspaces and AppStream and workspaces pools and all our wonderful end user compute products.
And so we've used the cool terminology end user compute and workspaces, but if you were going to show up to a family dinner and no one knows what we do for work, that's just a common theme across at least my family. They're like, Kyle, what do you do? Let me explain it to you. What would you say end user compute is? And then quick follow on to what is workspaces and what's the problem it solves? We already heard Robbie's use case of him sitting on a laptop, but really,
yeah, end user computing, really in a nutshell is at AWS, it's effectively our virtual desktop solutions, which come in the flavors of app virtualizations, full, virtual desktops, as well as actual endpoint devices with a thin client that we have as well. Secure browsers, that's also a flavor of end user computing. Of course, in the broader industry, end user computing also means laptops. But here at AWS, because we're all cloud, it's virtual and it's all in the cloud. If I'm going to talk around what workspaces is specifically, it's our virtual desktop solution or desktop as a service, which actually has a couple flavors, and we can get into that. But it better serves the types of users and use cases that we serve. We've got personal workspaces and pools of workspaces, which is actually what we're here to talk about today. Workspaces pools.
So aside from me just always thinking about swimming pools, because, I guess I can never get out of a pool when I was a kid, still can't put me in a pool, I'll be there forever until I'm starting to prune. Workspaces pools is a new feature to workspaces. So what is that and how is that going to be kind of changing how, end user computing can be made simpler, more cost effective, easier to manage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I contemplated actually wearing goggles, just to kind of play into the pools analogy, but, I figured, that's a little controversial.
I couldn't fit into my rubber duck, so I spared you all that.
Touche. So workspaces, really, when you look at virtual desktops, we have two flavors of it in the industry. We have persistent and non-persistent. And what people often refer to as persistent, we are calling workspaces personal. So that's a little bit of a shift from what we previously had in our workspaces as a brand. It was just solely persistent virtual desktops. Now, because we introduced that other flavor, which is on the opposite side of the spectrum, the non-persistent or pooled workspace, that's where customers can actually double click a little bit more on cost savings and optimizing, what their compute resources are doing, when and where. And so common use cases that you might see if you're in an IT organization, people really think, okay, I've got contractors, I'm not going to send them a laptop. I'm hiring somebody from, some BPO or some, consultancy to provide some temporary work or maybe just some contingent labor. They come with their own laptop. So that's actually a really common use case, of course, that many people know about. We give them a workspace or a virtual desktop. And that's where the user just basically can access it through a web browser, through, a native Mac, Windows, or Linux client. And so with, that's kind of if you want to call it the premier offering, you have a dedicated, infrastructure, dedicated compute, vCPUs, memory, all that stuff. It's all yours. So when you log in, log out, if you change the wallpaper and, where you put files on your desktop and you log back in the next day, it'll all be there. And like I said, it's really common to serve those knowledge worker type use cases where you have temporary labor or something. Somebody's got a laptop already. So why spend thousands of dollars shipping. And this was like huge during the pandemic. I think everyone was like, whoever was in an IT organization anywhere knows, like, I think I had like some people I was shipping some laptops to in Costa Rica, and they were like, oh, they're not new laptops. They're going to sit in quarantine for like months. And so
great.
This was but what we're here to talk about, WorkSpaces pools, is the opposite end of the spectrum. That's non-persistent. And that's basically, when you log into your session, think of it in terms of like a kiosk type use case, where you basically, have a set of applications that you want to offer to your users, and you just need that workspace, or pun intended, that, area where you're going to work. It's trying to do a game. Everybody basically, every time I say workspace, you have to
take a shot every time it says pools.
I wasn't going to say take a shot, but you said it, not me. So anyway, but yeah, like it's those use cases where you don't actually want your users to actually save their data on your desktop. You want it to be saved in central repositories. They don't need to have that dedicated, instance, dedicated, virtual computer. You have a pool of virtual computers that basically, are fungible. And every time you log in and log out, you get a fresh desktop based off of the template that you've defined and pre-configured. And that's what Dan's going to show us today. And it's really common. And it's really common for contact center type use cases, HR shared service center, where people are working out of applications like, SAP or Oracle or Workday, where, the data is already being stored and you want it to be stored centrally in that application itself. And so you don't want those users, maybe for PII type compliance reasons, you don't want them saving that data on their desktop. And so this actually mitigates that.
And it's providing, something that can be managed centrally in a decentralized workforce, right? So you can have workers throughout, but you're still maintaining your security standards, any regulations that you have to adhere to just keep your data safe. And that's what we're all about here.
Yeah.
So
and one of the big benefits that actually, by launching WorkSpaces pools, is that now we have spectrum that our customers can, either start with a workspace, and because we use the same clients, the same images, the same console, they basically can, let's say they think they need a personal workspace, where they have that dedicated infrastructure for one-to-one relationship to a user. And they could start with that and then realize, I don't need this. And they could very easily migrate them over to that WorkSpaces pools, where, it's generally for larger pools of users.
So they could scale it up or scale it back as necessary. Because I'm sure, let's just, we'll continue poking fun at Robbie, right? His laptop probably has like 16 gigs of RAM, and he probably might only use 4 gigs of it on any given day.
Yeah.
Granted, we use teleconferencing applications, which takes up like 14 cores. I'm kidding. But, you're able to right size, the compute to your users as well. I have a laptop that has like 16 gigs of RAM, and I do use it all. This thing is always humming and screaming at me. So maybe it would be easier for me to scale up to a bigger size based on my use cases. But will those use cases remain persistent through my career at AWS? Maybe, maybe not. And so it's you're giving that flexibility and also introducing cost efficiency, save money.
Yeah.
In a cool way.
Yeah. For those users that tend to use their laptops interchangeably as a whoopee cushion, like Robbie, when he likes to stop it. I just when you were telling me that story earlier, I was like, are we saying this just because I'm on the WorkSpaces team? But no, I'm excited we were able to help you. But the scaling part is actually a big differentiator between a personal persistent and a pooled non-persistent. And really, when people come from on-prem, where they actually own the infrastructure for their virtual computing or DaaS solutions, they often think like, I need to have a dedicated personal workspace for every user. And, we give them that option that they can start with that. But then what they realize is that you can save so much money with a non-persistent or pooled offering, and that you can define when you want those resources available. So, if I have 1,000 call center agents, signing in at like 8 a.m. Or 7 a.m. for their shifts, doing 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7, like 24/7, or even just like a fraction of that. And, maybe in the evening time, I only have like 500 users. In the daytime during my peak hours, I've got, 1,500. Like, you can set up the scaling so that, and that's really where the cost efficiency comes in, because you're basically saying, all right, I only need these resources during this time. So let me fine tune that. And so people often, when they come from on-prem to virtual desktop, fully cloud solution, are like afraid to basically not have like, you own the infrastructure. And so you're like, okay, no, let me get a dedicated instance, for everyone. And, that's fine. Like, we give them that option until they get that security. Maybe they're unfamiliar with their usage patterns, but now, with Workspaces pools, they can quickly toggle over. They can bring their M365 apps for enterprise, and, use all the applications that they want to just build that into their golden image that everybody basically will be able to log in and have access to.
Awesome. Well, and
Yeah.
Will, I loved hearing you talk about this really cool functionality and service, right? But I am a visual person. Give me pop-up books, a kaleidoscope, show me pretty things, right? And I'm a happy person. And I believe Dan is going to show us a demo. So if Dan, you're in a good spot, physically, mentally, maybe, we could bring your screen on if you'd like.
Yes, that sounds good.
All right, let's power. Haha. I did hit the button right.
Cool.
Oh, okay. So what are
Is
we
it coming
looking
through
at
okay?
again? Yeah, we could see an AWS console.
Perfect. So we are looking at the new Amazon Workspaces console. We've updated the console to reflect now the differences that we have a personal directory and a pool directory type. And then similarly in the left-hand column here, you can see we've split out Workspace themselves into personal and into pools. So personal and pools workspaces both have directory as a fundamental requirement, but there's an interesting distinction here. For personal workspaces directories, that means Active Directory, but in a pool directory sense, a directory is more like a collection of settings. There's not a requirement that you use Active Directory, but it is compatible with Active Directory. So let's take a look at creating one. So when you create a pool directory, you have a mixed dependency here on your SAML provider. Like I'm using Okta in my case. So we'll just put a placeholder here for the moment. We come back and change the setting later. We skip these two settings. And then over here for a directory name, we just specify a friendly name for a directory. It doesn't have to be an Active Directory fully qualified domain name or anything like that. So we can say demo directory. Typing is hard. And then we provide a description here as well.
Typing live in front of thousands of people is never a nerve-wracking moment, just by the way.
Right, exactly. Typos are 1,000 times more likely when someone's looking at what you're typing.
But this is what makes demos fun, and especially AWS OnAir, because perfect is boring.
Exactly.
I would be fat fingering everything, and so this is like, maybe you demo, I could talk and we can play. But one thing I want to call out is that, as Dan mentioned, in the personal and pools, like with the launch of Workspaces pools, as a feature of Workspaces, we were kind of like, wait a minute, we now need to differentiate what the existing Workspaces. So that's where we introduced the term personal, which is really common in the industry. If you are just like, oh my gosh, get me out of here, take me back to the old, there's a little toggle at the bottom that you can go back to the old console experience.
Of course, so if you want to regress, you can click that little button.
If you want to regress, exactly. Sorry, Dan, I wanted to give you some time to.
all good. Jump in anytime.
So you could swim to the other console.
Exactly.
Dive in the other pool.
Pools are punny.
Yep. That is satisfying. I'm trying to bring in software as a service somewhere, but it's not working. All right. So you configured network settings. So just real quick, network settings. VPC is your private network. Subnets are, the slices of IP addresses that you allocate to the VPC. And then security groups are what permit inbound and outbound access to these resources. Now, in this context, the security group is being attached to what necessarily, Dan?
It'll be attached to each EC2 instance that gets created as part of the pool behind the scenes. Okay, so if someone was like, well, we only want our workspaces, pools, or environment to be accessed from like our on-prem environment, this is where they could put in that IP address or CIDR range.
or maybe even like their web proxy address. That they would be brokering.
It's slightly more nuanced than that.
Okay.
It'll be and that's just because of the way end user computing services handle networking. We have a primary network adapter that lives in our control plane and a secondary network adapter that gets attached in the customer VPC. This attaches to the customer side of that equation, but the inbound security where you specify streaming stuff, that is not modified by this here. So by default, that's open to the world. So we use, for pools, you're going to use SAML 2.0 authentication. So for example, you're going to set this up. I used Okta to set this up, but you can set this up in Entra ID or Ping Federate or any other SAML 2.0 compliant provider. And you'll specify, if you want to specify things like source locations or geo restrictions, things like that, you set that up on the SAML IDP side in the case of pools.
Okay. So for the end users that might be watching this, they might be going, what does this all mean? It's just an easy way for you to authenticate, but in a safe and secure way. For the administrative side of things, we got your back for modern authentication technologies.
Exactly.
And then question, Dan, from just like a setup perspective, nothing here is unique to the pools experience. This will be familiar to Workspaces customers.
Yes, this is unique to this is familiar to Workspaces customers, and especially it's familiar to AppStream customers. It's got a little bit of a combination of both types of setup. So, for example, down here, the secrets manager piece, this is new to Workspaces pools. That's required here if you're going to do the optional Active Directory configuration, where you say you want us to have your instances join your Active Directory. We put them in a domain for you. So if you did that, you would specify these two: the desired organizational unit the computer object should join into, and then the fully qualified domain name of the directory. And then in order for us to join, we have to have a service account credentials with permissions to do domain joins. And in Workspaces pools, you'll store that in AWS Secrets Manager, which allows you to do things like programmatically rotate the credentials.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with Secrets Manager, we actually do a deep dive on lockdown. We'll try to find a link to that episode of how Secrets Manager can do really cool things with managing secrets, names on the tin. But that's really cool that this is integrated just out of the box for that secrets management. All right, so we are going down our configuration. We have streaming properties, and that's not like, video streaming, I'm assuming. This looks like the ability to, so Will mentioned, hey, how can we keep data from being copied and pasted from a host environment to the workspace environment? I'm assuming that's where this is coming into play.
Exactly. And you have some granular control here. So the default option is to allow bidirectional copy and paste. But if you want to fully disable that or make it unidirectional, so for example, users can paste from their client computer into the pool, but not the other way around, you can set that here too. So we have a good amount of customers who don't want any back and forth between the client side and the workspace side. So it's very straightforward. You just disable it here and that's it.
Cool. And you can do a local character limit on both directions too. Print to local device. So this looks like a lot of easy administrative settings to make it a secure, like if you want to make it super easy to make data go back and forth, you can. If you want to lock it down as tight as possible, you can do that here too.
Exactly. And then optionally down here, there's a few more settings. You can have print to local device. You can control that. We allow that by default. If you want to set up smart card stuff, you can allow that here too. And then we also have home folders as an option. This will be familiar to you if you've worked with AppStream before. It's where we provision a folder for the user virtually in S3, and then the users see that when they log in. So as these are non-persistent devices, you do need to give users some way to save their files between sessions if you have them working on files. And so home folders are a quick and easy way to get that going because they'll see those in Windows Explorer, they can save there, and those will always be visible to them whenever they go and reconnect into a new session.
Okay, and it looks like it's backed by S3 too. So all the functionality and features within S3 are afforded to as like the durability, the ability to do replication, like lifecycle policy, all that stuff, really cool stuff. But that's to maintain persistent storage throughout the different sessions.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. You can also use OneDrive as well, which obviously because, the ability to bring M365 licenses. That's another option that's more familiar to users.
Yeah. So if you are using that, you can use it. If you're not using it, but need to have storage across multiple, sessions, right? They're not needing to go out to somewhere and get something.
Exactly.
Cool beans, as they say, I think. I don't know. I've never been part of the cool crowd. All right. So once we're done and you hit the create button.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to flag one more thing here, which is that Pools has the ability to associate an IAM role to the Pool streaming instances. So if you want to let end users programmatically interact with AWS resources like S3 or Elasticache or anything else, and you don't want them to tap to manually configure an AWS credentials profile within the instance, you can configure an IAM role here, and that lets users automatically retrieve the permissions you want them to have without any manual setup on the workspace side.
Well, that's cool. Neato.
So we'll go ahead to create this now.
All right. Start digging that hole in the ground, creating our pool. Don't forget the concrete and ceiling.
Yeah, this is where the Julia Child kind of
and so believe it or not, we're not going to be faking it. We pre-baked an environment, so we're not all watching water boil.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
We have an environment that was already created by Dan and Will, but essentially it's all those settings that you just had, and then we just fast forwarded it.
Yep, exactly. So once you've dug the hole in the ground, as it were, then you can start to fill it with water. So we come over here to our pools side of the workspaces console, and then you can create a pool directory here. So this is another piece that's new, is that we have an onboarding wizard to help steer you through some of this stuff if you're new to the workspaces experience or you're trying to decide which type of workspaces you should be looking at.
Helps you wade through the options.
Exactly. So you can specify whether you want to make a persistent or a non-persistent workspace session.
Okay.
And then also you can answer questions about the use case behind the session. So
now, will that use case help kind of provision the amount of compute resources that are needed?
Yes. So that will point you in the direction of what type of compute. Yep.
Super. Because I can't tell you how many times before my cloud career, I was also responsible for the person that would order the laptops and build them based on like t-shirt sizes or use cases of like engineers and designers. And, I worked for people that made things that fly. And so you'd have all these varieties of hardware, but sometimes I would just not know what kind of hardware we should get. This is like saying, hey, Kyle, if they're going to be a designer, be it graphics, use this kind of compute. That is awesome.
Yeah, Dan, maybe we can jump and show the end user login experience just so.
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, give me just a moment here. So we'll just pick the I know what ones to will use just to quickly show how the pool side of this looks.
Okay.
You can enter, enter a name and description, and then you can either pick one of our public bundles, or you can use a custom bundle. Like I pre-provisioned one where I built Windows Server 2022 with M365, and then you can specify your things like application, like your settings for your session duration, how long to give users between disconnect and idle disconnect time.
Okay.
So before we actually recycle the instance that they're attached to. And then application settings persistence is another great thing to know about. This saves things like the user's HKey current user registry hive. A lot of Windows programs write their settings when you actually save a preference into that location. So that means that when the users log in the next day and they get a brand new instance, with the majority of applications, their settings will follow them to that new application, which helps minimize the friction that a user might have with getting essentially a brand new computer every day.
Okay. All right. And then, so yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Now, when this is all configured and said and done, because it looks like there's a lot of options that we could do to customize the experience that you would want your end users to have.
Exactly.
What does it look like when you log in?
So when you log into it, so this will be the WorkSpaces client. There's a couple ways you could do it. Well, I'm going to show the WorkSpaces client, and I've also got one that's been pre-logged into here with the web client. The web client one is pretty straightforward because you will just see
web client being just like browser-based access.
Browser-based access.
Yep, cool.
So you can see, like, you would just click this at this is for Okta for me. You would just click this this button here, and then it just bounces you around and logs you into this. You don't have to do any more active actions past that point. An exception here, and I'll just do the full login here on the client side. An exception is with Active Directory. In order to get a fully seamless login with Active Directory, you'll need certificate-based authentication, which we do support, but I don't have configured in this demo. Without certificate-based authentication, the client will load this up, and then
Cool.
in my case, I had done this already with that. So you have the session that's open. You can hit the start menu, open up a Microsoft 365 application.
And just like that, you're able to do your thing off to the races.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that my identity here has been persisted up in the top right. So you can see my user credential that logged in, and then my Office 365 demo account up here at the top right.
Cool stuff. Well, hey, thank you so much, guys, for your time. I learned a lot about Workspaces and how it could help people like Robbie, when they need a computer and they don't have access to one. There is more to read about. We'll be dropping the links if you want to read more about Workspaces and Workspaces pools. But we'll drop in the link. But also, Will, Dan, thank you so much for your time. Now it's
thank you for
time to
having us.
say goodbye to Will and
Thank you.